Hi there, this is Abhishek, and in this video I will talk about time series forecasting, or it will be better to say that from this video I will start the series of time series forecasting videos, where in subsequent videos I will take you from a beginner to advanced about doing time series forecasting. So many of the times you have heard about this term time series forecasting if you are browsing the internet for data science and all that. It is one of the important technique that a data scientist should have in their bag for predicting the future events. And as I mentioned, the main focus of this technique is to forecast. That means predicting the future. So let's go ahead. What is forecasting? Forecasting is, as it is mentioned here, predicting future events based on historical activities. That's the very basic of your time series, that it looks at the historical data and based on that it predicts the future events. And that's one of the assumptions of time series, that the events that have impacted in the past will continue to impact in the future, and based on that assumption you do the forecasting and predict the values. All right, so couple of use cases like predicting revenues. Every company is really interested in predicting the revenues based on their activities that they are doing, as well as they have to give guidance sometimes to the Wall Street or to their respective stock market to basically tell how much revenue they will going to generate next quarter. And if you have observed, it is somehow within the range that, okay, we will do between 50 million to 60 million or 50 million to 55 million, some range that they give a lower and higher, but never an actual one. So that's something I will cover in upcoming videos, that why it is the case. Then we have like predicting earthquakes, that as you can understand, there are a lot of scientists who are collecting the data on the earthquakes based on the magnitude where it has come and their related circumstances because of which the earthquake might have come. And based on that, they try to predict any future earthquakes. So these days you might have seen in newspapers that whenever an earthquake is coming, there is an advisory already being given from the government to the public that they should be aware that this might happen and they should be all set to recover from it. So that's one of the use case. Third one is predicting new jobs. So based on the events that the industry has seen, whether the upward or downward, you are basically, or scientists or data scientists is basically predicting any new jobs that is coming and overall in a market or a particular segment into a market. Apart from that, if you are a school or a college, based on how you are performing or the enrollments you have got in the past, you will see that the new enrollment that you will going to get. All right, so what is time series? So a time series is a set of numerical data obtained at a regular period of time. That's like the basic definition. So this part is important, that a regular period of time, that means if it is a quarterly time series or a monthly time series, yearly time series, so the period should not change. You cannot create a time series where one point is representing a quarter and another point is representing a month. That will not help. It can be quarter. If it is quarter, it can be year. As you can see, it is distributed over year, and based on that you can plot the data. That's like one of the very first requirement of the time series, that you plot the data and observe it, what kind of time series it is. And let's spend a couple of minutes over here on this chart to basically try to understand these time series. So first of all, if you observe this data, which is starting right from here and going all the way up till here, you are able to see that it is an upward trend data. if somebody will have to draw a line, it will go like this upward direction. So first of all, we can see that there is a trend component in this time series. So why I'm giving an emphasis on trend, because that's one of the things that we need to observe whether data is following any kind of trend or not. It is one of the important component of your time series. So one thing is that it has the trend component. Alright, what else? If you are able to see that right from here, after a regular interval, it is making some sort of peaks. That means there is some sort of seasonal component which is present here, and as well as making a downward peak over here. So that basically says that it has some sort of seasonal component, and based on that it is making an upward and downward peaks. As well as someone may argue that probably it's not seasonal, it is cyclical component, and that's also one of the component. So that's something one can argue, and based on your data expertise you can really tell, okay, whether it is some sort of a cycle that in one particular quarter your revenues are going up, but in certain quarter it is going down, going up and then going down. So it's not seasonal, it is the nature of business. Or one can argue, no, here because of the season, let's say if it is a winter season and you are a clothing company, then your revenues are going high because definitely people are buying more clothes in the winter season, and then going down to in the summer, and that's the kind of trend you are seeing. So that really depends on data, whether this series is following a seasonal component or a cyclical component, and that is based on your expertise of the data. So we have discussed about, first of all, trend that is present in the data, the seasonal or cyclical component. The last component that is part of the time series is the irregular component. So for example, if you see any unusual spike or any unusual data point which is at the very high or at the very low, which you are not able to explain, and which may be the reason of, let's say you are one of the company into a big labor market and there is a strike, and because of that for a month your production was down. And apart from that, let's say if there was an earthquake or some other natural calamity because of which your production was down, and that basically impacted your revenues or your production data, which is plotted over time and which you are trying to predict. So with the help of that level of business expertise, you can explain that error and see and basically make some adjustment about it before going ahead and doing or creating the model. So these are the 4 components. I will just repeat it again. The first one is the trend component, the upward or downward trend, and in this series you can see there is an upward trend. Second thing is cyclical or seasonal trend. Based on the data expertise, you can identify whether your data follows any cyclical or seasonal trend. And the final one is the irregular component. That means something which either you cannot explain because of the spike on the upward or downward side, and that is basically part of your data. And sometimes it may happen that you are able to explain because you know why that happened, and I just covered that natural calamity or strike or anything can happen which is impacting this. So why these components are important? Well, these components are important because if you really want to predict the next revenues or sales or anything of your interest, you need to remove these components and make your series stationary. Well, that's an important thing because generally stationary concept is a little bit complex if I tell you a lot in theory and with the help of formulas, but what you can understand from a basic or a beginner's point of view, that if any of this thing, trend, seasonal, cyclical, or any error is present in your data, that means your data is not stationary or not normal. If it is not normally distributed, which is one of the assumption of doing the regression or doing any forecasting, then you will not be able to do that. So we will see in upcoming videos how we can make the series stationary or normal and remove these components, as well as, because R is so advanced, you will be able to see the components like trend, seasonal, cyclical in a altogether different section of the chart. So I'll show you in that particular piece in upcoming videos, and that will be the process of creating the time series models. All right, let's move on. So after this, what is the process of time series forecasting? Well, this is important, and just take it as a very high level process, because there will be a lot of sub processes within the time series forecasting process. So first process is plot the data. As I mentioned earlier also, very first thing you will do is you will plot the data over a period of time. So it can be sales data, revenue data, attrition data, whatever it is, and time should be the same unit. It can be quarter, week, month. If it is follow weeks, all the values on the x-axis will be weeks. If it is quarter, all the values on the x-axis will be quarter. Second thing is non-stationary data. That means there are different components, trend, cyclical, seasonal, or irregular, that make the data stationary. Third thing, identify the model technique that best suited your forecasting. Well, there are a number of methods. We will see what are all these different methods in the next slide, and then go ahead and do the forecasting. Finally, build the model. Well, and then do the prediction. Yeah. So these are the 5 steps that you have for doing the time series forecasting, and we will see a lot about these 5 steps in the upcoming videos, and I'll cover a lot of examples that will help you understand this process. Okay, finally, the last slide that I have for you in this beginner video is models that we will be using in this series. Or at a high level, I have tried to cover pretty much all of those models which you generally see when you will try to do the forecasting. First of all, I have moving averages, exponential moving averages, least square regression for time series, quadratic regression, exponential regression, and ARIMA models. So these are the 6 models that we will going to use in this series, and I will explain each of this model to you with the help of an example, and as well as we will cover some real life use cases where you'll see how we can do the prediction based on this. Finally, I'll see that there is one other thing about if there is a lot of seasonality, a lot of cyclical components are present, then those things are really hard to do the prediction, and sometimes impacts even if you make the series stationary. So I'll try to gather some more examples around that. So far I have not done that. So probably in one of the last videos, when we will be a little bit on the advanced stage, I'll see what I can find it out about those really advanced and very frequent business use cases, because that's the kind of data I think you will find when you will actually use it. Alright, so that's pretty much all I have for you in this first video, where I just wanted to introduce you to the time series forecasting, and I'll meet you in the new video with this new topic.